I didn't expect a card to ruin Thanksgiving, Margaret whispered to herself as she placed the last dish on the dining table, the golden brown turkey steaming invitingly under the warm kitchen lights. The scent of roasted vegetables and pumpkin pie filled the air, a comforting aroma that had always marked the start of the holiday. Her husband, David, was bustling around, adjusting chairs and making sure everything looked perfect, while the grandchildren giggled in the corner, chasing each other in a game only they could understand. Margaret's heart swelled with anticipation. She loved hosting, loved seeing her family come together, and today was no different, or so she thought. The front door opened, and in walked Jessica, her daughter-in-law, carrying a bag of store-bought sides, her expression distant and her voice clipped as she wished everyone a quiet, happy Thanksgiving. Margaret forced a smile, welcoming her politely, while Jessica's eyes scanned the room without much warmth. The meal began with laughter and chatter, the family settling into their usual rhythm. Yet Margaret couldn't shake the small unease creeping along the edges of her heart. That was when her gaze fell on the card carefully placed in the center of the table, facing her like an unspoken message. Family trip, clean the house. The words hit her like a cold draft in an otherwise cozy room, a sting of disappointment that left her momentarily speechless. Margaret held the card in her hands, feeling the paper's smooth surface, the neat handwriting mocking the countless hours she had spent preparing, cleaning, and ensuring that family gatherings ran smoothly. She remembered last year, the year before, every holiday, every birthday, all the silent labor that went unnoticed but never unappreciated, until now. Her mind wandered through memories of early mornings in the kitchen, rolling dough, chopping vegetables, setting tables meticulously, and the quiet joy she had felt watching her family enjoy the results. But today, the joy was tinged with a sharp ache. The appreciation she had expected seemed absent, replaced by a reminder that her efforts were taken for granted. The family continued eating, conversations flowing around her, but Margaret felt a peculiar stillness within, a resolve forming in the depths of her heart. She took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the room mingle with the cool sense of betrayal simmering quietly. Margaret's gaze met Jessica's for a brief moment, a polite smile masking the unease on both sides. She realized that her reaction would set the tone for the rest of the evening, and though she felt the sting of disrespect, she would not let it dominate her holiday. Instead, she chose a calm observation, noting the way her husband subtly glanced at her with concern, the children obliviously enjoying the pies, and the way Jessica moved through the room as if the card had no weight at all. Margaret's mind began weaving the strategy of subtle confrontation, understanding that the true strength lay not in loud words but in measured responses, patience, and the quiet power of dignity. She placed the card back on the table, her fingers lingering just long enough to remind herself that she mattered, that her years of care and dedication were not invisible, and that tonight, even amid discomfort, she could remain composed and quietly influential. The laughter, the clinking of silverware, the warmth of candlelight, they all continued around her, but Margaret's inner world was already shifting, preparing for the calm but decisive steps she would take to reclaim respect and subtly guide her family toward awareness of the thoughtlessness she had endured, beginning a Thanksgiving that would linger in memory far beyond the meal itself. Margaret set her fork down and allowed her gaze to drift across the dining room, noting the subtle shifts in expressions around the table. Her son, Peter, was quietly enjoying his plate, seemingly oblivious to the tension, while the grandchildren were still caught up in their playful antics, the youngest trying to balance a slice of pie on a fork. Margaret's eyes lingered on Jessica as she casually chatted with other relatives, her tone light but measured, as if unaware of the undercurrent in the room. Margaret took a slow breath, reminding herself to remain composed, understanding that any overt reaction would only give Jessica an advantage. She remembered how she had always valued these moments, the sense of family togetherness, and she resolved not to let a single card tarnish that. As conversation flowed, Margaret began subtly steering the discussion towards shared memories, stories of past Thanksgivings, the little mishaps in the kitchen, and the laughter that had always followed. The warmth of nostalgia softened the edges of the evening, gently pulling the family into familiar rhythms. While speaking, She noticed the small details she had often overlooked before. The way Peter's eyebrows knit slightly when he sensed unease. The way one of the grandchildren paused mid-bite to watch her. The polite smiles of extended relatives who seemed to sense the tension without knowing the cause. Margaret realized that her strength lay in observing, in allowing the natural course of events to reveal truths. She continued sharing anecdotes, sprinkling in humor and encouragement, creating a bridge between the lingering unease and the light-hearted atmosphere she had intended to preserve. Every comment, every glance was measured, designed to maintain dignity while subtly highlighting the contrast in attitudes without confrontation. As the meal progressed, Margaret found a quiet satisfaction in watching the subtle shifts in family dynamics, recognizing the power of patience and presence. The card remained on the table, a silent reminder of disregard, yet it no longer held the weight to unsettle her. She felt a growing confidence, a quiet assertion that respect and acknowledgement were earned not through words alone, but through the steady consistency of character and the gentle influence of thoughtful actions. By the time dessert was served, Margaret had reclaimed the emotional space she valued, ensuring that the remainder of the holiday would carry the warmth and togetherness she had envisioned, even if Jessica's behavior remained unchanged. And in doing so, she prepared herself for the opportunities that would arise to address the slight with tact, wisdom, and the poised authority of someone who had spent decades nurturing her family with love and resilience. As Margaret cleared the last of the dishes from the table, she felt a quiet determination settling in her chest, a sense that she could navigate the rest of the evening with grace and composure. The grandchildren were now gathered around the living room, their laughter echoing softly as they played a simple game of charades, and Margaret allowed herself a brief smile, appreciating the innocence and joy that persisted despite the earlier tension. Peter lingered near the kitchen, washing a few remaining utensils, and Margaret noticed his subtle glances toward her, an unspoken acknowledgement that he sensed the unease yet did not fully understand its cause. She quietly moved toward the counter, arranging the dessert plates with care, her movements deliberate and measured, ensuring that the warmth and aesthetic of the table were preserved. The card remained in its place, visible yet unobtrusive, a silent mark of disregard, but Margaret refused to let it dictate the mood of the gathering. As she worked, she engaged in light conversation with her daughter-in-law, speaking with calm politeness, asking about the route to the family trip, commenting on the weather, and weaving in small compliments about the contributions Jessica had made to the meal, each word carefully measured to maintain dignity and assert gentle acknowledgement of the effort expected from all members. Margaret noticed subtle changes in the room as she spoke, the way her husband's shoulders relaxed slightly, the way a cousin raised an eyebrow at Jessica, and the way the grandchildren paused to listen to the story she shared about a previous Thanksgiving mishap that had everyone in stitches. Margaret's mind worked quietly, observing the dynamics, understanding that influence often came through presence and tact rather than confrontation. She remembered her own experiences, the importance of patience and the strategic use of calm authority, and she allowed that wisdom to guide her interactions, ensuring that every smile, every comment, every movement reinforced her role as the matriarch who commanded respect not through loud words, but through consistency and integrity. By the time the dessert plates were cleared, Margaret had managed to subtly reshape the energy in the room, the earlier tension softened by her poised responses and measured storytelling, creating an atmosphere where laughter and warmth could once again take center stage. She caught Jessica glancing toward her occasionally, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, and Margaret simply returned a polite smile, knowing that the evening's lessons were unfolding naturally, that awareness was dawning without the need for overt admonishment. As the last of the grandchildren were coaxed into their pajamas and tucked into bed, Margaret finally allowed herself a moment to sit quietly in the living room, reflecting on the power of calm observation, the importance of subtle influence, and the quiet strength that came from remaining composed even when faced with disregard, understanding that the evening had already begun to shift in her favor, and that patience and dignity would continue to guide the family toward mutual respect in the days to come. As the evening settled into a quiet rhythm, Margaret found herself drawn to the living room window, watching the faint glow of the streetlights illuminate the crisp autumn leaves outside. The house was still, the echoes of laughter and conversation now softened into comfortable silence. She reflected on the interactions of the evening, considering the delicate balance she had maintained between acknowledging her own feelings and preserving the harmony of the family gathering. Jessica had retreated to the couch with a magazine, occasionally glancing up to catch snippets of conversation, seemingly unaware of the subtle shifts Margaret had orchestrated. Margaret allowed herself a moment to observe, noting the small gestures, the fleeting expressions, and the quiet acknowledgments that spoke volumes about the unspoken dynamics in the room. She remembered the importance of consistency, of demonstrating poise and integrity even in moments where disrespect could easily provoke a reaction. With each passing minute, she felt the quiet power of her presence solidifying, a gentle influence that encouraged reflection without confrontation. Margaret moved to the bookshelf, pulling down a photo album that chronicled years of family celebrations, and she began to share stories aloud, her voice warm and inviting, recounting childhood memories of Peter and his siblings, the amusing mishaps during holidays past, and the small victories that had always brought smiles to the faces around her. Each story served a dual purpose, reinforcing bonds and subtly highlighting the care and thoughtfulness she had consistently invested in the family. As she spoke, she noticed Peter leaning closer, listening more intently, and even Jessica momentarily lowering her magazine, caught by a story that brought a genuine smile to Margaret's face. The grandchildren, drawn by the liveliness of the recollections, joined in, their laughter punctuating the narrative, adding an atmosphere of light-hearted warmth. Margaret felt a sense of satisfaction, understanding that her measured approach had shifted the tone of the evening, fostering a space where acknowledgement and respect could naturally arise. She continued, weaving in humor, gentle reminders of shared responsibilities, and stories that illustrated the values she had long hoped to instill in the family. The card on the dining table no longer held the power to unsettle her. It was now a quiet symbol of an opportunity to guide awareness subtly and gracefully. As the clock ticked toward bedtime for the grandchildren, Margaret observed the calm contentment in the room, the ease in conversation, and the gentle smiles exchanged between family members. She allowed herself a quiet reflection on the importance of resilience, the strength of patience, and the understated authority that comes from remaining composed and intentional. Tonight had been a demonstration of influence exercised through presence, poise, and quiet observation, and Margaret recognized that the lessons of the evening would resonate far beyond the meal itself, shaping the family's understanding of respect, consideration, and the enduring value of thoughtful actions. Margaret felt the quiet hum of the evening settle around her like a soft blanket, the gentle ticking of the wall clock marking the passage of time as she moved through the living room with a serene composure. She noticed Jessica arranging a small stack of magazines on the coffee table, the deliberate movements betraying an underlying awareness that she could not fully conceal. Margaret allowed herself a small, knowing smile, recognizing the subtle shift in energy that patience and observation could produce. She began to engage Peter in conversation about plans for the upcoming family trip, weaving in suggestions for activities that encouraged teamwork and shared responsibility, all while maintaining a lighthearted and encouraging tone. The grandchildren wandered nearby, fascinated by the colorful illustrations in the photo album Margaret had left open on the couch, and she took a moment to recount the story behind each picture, her voice gentle yet animated, drawing smiles and laughter from the children. Jessica, noticing the warmth and attention Margaret commanded without force, shifted slightly in her seat, a fleeting glance indicating that she sensed the underlying assertion of presence and dignity that Margaret maintained effortlessly. Margaret continued to tell stories, recalling humorous incidents from past holidays and the little challenges that had always been met with patience, resilience, and care, emphasizing the values of consideration and mutual respect without ever needing to speak directly to the slight earlier in the evening. The room began to feel lighter, the atmosphere more genuine, as family members responded naturally to Margaret's composed energy, their interactions becoming more open and engaged. Peter laughed softly at a recollection Margaret shared about his childhood antics, and even Jessica chuckled quietly at a detail she had not anticipated, a subtle acknowledgement of Margaret's quiet authority. As dessert plates were cleared and the evening drew on, Margaret guided the conversation toward shared memories and future plans, encouraging collaboration and kindness through example rather than command, allowing each family member to participate fully and feel valued. She observed carefully, noting the small but meaningful changes in behavior and awareness around the room, appreciating the quiet victories that patience and composure had afforded her. By the time the living room was tidied and the children settled for the night, Margaret felt a sense of satisfaction, recognizing that her steady presence had gently reshaped the dynamics of the household, reinforcing respect and consideration in a natural and lasting manner, leaving the family to enjoy a peaceful conclusion to the holiday gathering. Margaret moved through the quiet house, her footsteps soft against the polished hardwood floors as she checked that each room was tidy and welcoming for the next day. The living room, still bearing the remnants of the evening, held the warmth of shared laughter and careful storytelling, the glow of the table lamps casting gentle shadows across the walls. Margaret paused by the fireplace, arranging a few framed photographs she had brought down from the shelves, each image capturing a moment of family joy, a reminder of traditions and the bonds that had been nurtured over the years. Peter joined her for a moment, offering a small smile of appreciation for her efforts, and Margaret responded with a gentle nod, acknowledging the silent support he had offered throughout the evening. In the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the lingering scent of pumpkin pie, and Margaret poured herself a cup, savoring the warmth and comfort as she leaned against the counter, reflecting on the subtle dynamics that had shifted during the holiday. Jessica entered briefly to clear a few dishes, her movements efficient but quieter than before, a soft awareness in her demeanor that Margaret recognized without needing to be spoken aloud. Margaret guided the conversation toward shared plans for upcoming family gatherings, mentioning ideas for activities that involved everyone, emphasizing inclusion, cooperation, and consideration, carefully phrasing her words to reinforce respect and attentiveness without confrontation. The grandchildren, drawn by the calm energy and stories of past adventures, returned from their games to share their thoughts, their laughter blending with the soothing rhythm of conversation. Margaret observed carefully, noting how the interactions were now more balanced, the earlier tension dissipating, and the family beginning to respond to her poised presence, the influence of patience and composed authority becoming evident in the small but meaningful gestures of acknowledgement and attentiveness. As she continued, Margaret encouraged reminiscences and light-hearted jokes, weaving in reflections on shared values and experiences, creating an atmosphere where lessons were absorbed naturally and harmoniously. The house, once vibrant with the active chaos of preparation and celebration, now hummed with a gentle contentment, the family united in subtle understanding and renewed appreciation. Margaret felt a quiet pride in the way the evening had unfolded, the careful orchestration of calm dialogue, thoughtful storytelling, and attentive observation having guided the family toward a deeper awareness and respect for one another. By the time the clock neared bedtime, Margaret had ensured that the household exuded warmth and order, that each member felt seen and included, and that the subtle lessons of patience, dignity, and gentle guidance had taken root, promising a future of continued harmony and mindful interaction within the family. Margaret rose from the living room couch, stretching her shoulders as she moved toward the kitchen to collect the empty coffee mugs, her steps slow and deliberate, each motion measured to maintain the calm energy she had cultivated throughout the evening. Peter followed quietly, offering to help carry the dishes to the sink, and Margaret accepted with a soft smile, acknowledging his subtle participation without needing words of praise. The grandchildren had retreated to the playroom, their laughter now replaced by the gentle hum of a favorite story being read aloud, creating a soothing background that contrasted with the earlier tension. Margaret arranged the mugs neatly on the counter, wiping down the surface with care, her movements precise and intentional, reflecting the poise she relied on to guide the family atmosphere. She glanced toward Jessica, who was tidying a small stack of napkins on the dining table, noticing the slight hesitation in her gestures, an unspoken awareness of the presence and composure Margaret had maintained. Choosing her words thoughtfully, Margaret engaged Peter in conversation about future family meals, suggesting ideas that encouraged shared responsibility, cooperation, and thoughtful participation from everyone, weaving in humor and fond memories of past holidays to maintain warmth and connection. The subtle interplay of voices and glances created a rhythm in the room, an unspoken dialogue that Margaret understood well, allowing her to reinforce respect and mindfulness without direct confrontation. She recounted a story about an unexpected kitchen mishap from several Thanksgivings ago, highlighting the teamwork and patience required to resolve it, each anecdote serving to underscore the importance of kindness, attentiveness, and shared effort. Peter nodded occasionally, absorbing the lessons implicitly, while Jessica listened with quiet attentiveness, her expression softening as she registered the steady influence of Margaret's demeanor. The grandchildren peeked from the playroom, drawn by the gentle laughter and engaging storytelling, and Margaret welcomed their presence, including them naturally in the conversation, ensuring that everyone felt valued and connected. As the evening wore on, Margaret felt the satisfaction of subtle guidance at work, the small but meaningful shifts in behavior and awareness creating an atmosphere of calm, mutual respect, and warmth. She recognized that her approach had gently reshaped the family dynamics, reinforcing consideration and attentiveness, and allowing the family to experience harmony without overt instruction or confrontation. By the time the dishes were put away and the room returned to its evening stillness, Margaret felt a quiet pride in her ability to influence the environment through presence, patience, and composed authority, understanding that these subtle but consistent actions would continue to cultivate respect and understanding in the family long after the evening had ended, leaving everyone with a sense of inclusion and thoughtful connection. Margaret sank back into the living room chair, the soft cushions embracing her as she exhaled a long, steady breath, feeling the weight of the evening shift into a calm satisfaction. The soft hum of the ceiling fan mixed with the distant sounds of the children settling in their rooms, their gentle murmurs reminding her of the joy and energy that had filled the house earlier. She sipped from her warm cup of tea, allowing the rich aroma to calm her thoughts while reflecting on the subtle, yet significant changes she had observed in the family over the course of the holiday. Peter joined her quietly, holding a folded blanket for the couch, and they exchanged a look of quiet understanding, a shared acknowledgement that the evening had unfolded with greater harmony than anticipated. Margaret allowed the conversation to drift to lighter topics, discussing upcoming plans for the weekend, local community events, and small projects around the house, steering the interaction to encourage cooperation and shared enjoyment while maintaining a warm and inclusive tone. Jessica entered briefly, offering to help organize a few remaining items on the coffee table, and Margaret responded with polite gratitude, careful to maintain an atmosphere of cordiality and subtle guidance. The family photos that Margaret had displayed earlier caught her attention again, and she recounted a few anecdotes, highlighting humorous situations and moments of achievement, allowing the stories to emphasize teamwork, patience, and thoughtful consideration without directly addressing the earlier tension. She noted the shifts in body language and expressions, recognizing the growing awareness among family members of the value of attentive listening and mutual respect. The evening's energy continued to evolve positively, each shared smile, laugh, and gentle interaction reinforcing the atmosphere of calm and mindful engagement Margaret had sought to cultivate. She reflected on the lessons of composure, understanding that influence could be exercised quietly through presence, empathy, and careful storytelling. By maintaining patience and measured actions, Margaret had guided the family toward a more connected and respectful dynamic, providing a subtle framework for behavior that encouraged reflection and awareness. As the last of the household chores were completed and the lights dimmed to a soft glow, Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the principles of kindness, thoughtful attention, and steady guidance had taken root, shaping an environment where respect and consideration would continue to thrive. In this quiet, reflective moment, she appreciated the nuanced shifts in energy and interaction, recognizing that the calm authority she had exercised would continue to influence the family positively, fostering a sense of harmony, connection, and lasting understanding that extended beyond the evening itself. Margaret sat quietly in the soft glow of the living room, the last of the evening's activity fading into a gentle calm, her mind reflecting on the subtle but meaningful shifts that had occurred throughout the night. The grandchildren were tucked into bed, their soft breaths carrying the contentment of a day well spent, and Peter was gathering a few items from the kitchen, offering occasional glances toward Margaret that conveyed both gratitude and unspoken acknowledgement of the harmony she had fostered. Jessica remained seated near the couch, her posture relaxed yet slightly reserved, a quiet recognition evident in her expressions that Margaret had noticed without needing to comment. Margaret allowed the serenity of the house to envelop her, feeling the sense of accomplishment that came from guiding interactions with care and patience, understanding that influence was often most effective when exercised through quiet presence rather than overt assertion. She revisited the events of the evening in her mind, recalling the moments when stories and shared laughter had drawn attention to the values of attentiveness, cooperation, and respect, and she felt a calm satisfaction in knowing that these lessons had been received naturally, without confrontation or overt instruction. The photo album she had opened earlier still rested on the coffee table, its images serving as a gentle reminder of the enduring bonds that connected the family across years of shared experiences, celebrations, and holidays. Margaret sipped the remaining tea in her cup, savoring the warmth and reflecting on the subtle victories that patience and poise had achieved, noting how family dynamics had shifted to a more balanced and considerate energy that evening. She allowed herself a small smile, observing how the soft interactions, polite gestures, and attentive listening among family members reflected a newfound awareness and respect that had grown without her needing to impose it directly. The quiet hum of the house, the faint rustle of the heating system, and the muted shadows cast by the lamps all contributed to a feeling of gentle closure, signaling that the family had navigated through the complexities of the day with grace and mindfulness. Margaret recognized the importance of maintaining such composure and thoughtful guidance consistently, understanding that the subtle reinforcement of values, attention, and inclusion would continue to resonate in future gatherings. She reflected on the lessons of the evening, appreciating the power of measured responses, quiet observation, and strategic patience in shaping interactions and influencing perceptions without the need for overt confrontation. As the night deepened, the house settled into a tranquil rhythm. Margaret's heart warmed by the sense of connection and mutual respect she had nurtured, aware that the evening had concluded not only with laughter and shared memories, but also with a renewed understanding of patience, dignity, and the enduring value of thoughtful guidance in the family dynamic.